organized syndicates invading residential properties when owners are on holiday. I do know there's number of buildings in downtown Johannesburg and possibly also in Hillbrow and possibly in other parts of the country that have been invaded, and the landlords or the people who own those properties have just walked away from it because they can't evict these people, and it's costing them lots of money. Litigation is costing them lots of money. What is the situation? And does that also suggest then that we have a problem with our legislation and the PI Act in particular?
The situation is really quite straightforward. The PI Act was promulgated in 1998, and in my opinion, the drafters envisaged perhaps illegal occupants of vacant land, not of residential buildings, not of residential dwellings. And most definitely, no one envisaged the type of organized crime that would pick up very quickly that there's a loophole available for them to make use of the onerous process which PI provides, as well as to make use of the incapacity of the South African police services in quite a few instances. So the hijacking of a building or of a residential unit it's very well organized. Quite often the syndicate has informants within the South African Police Service, within the administrative arm of the judiciary. They know how to delay the process. So if your residential unit, apartment block, whatever it might be, is targeted by these syndicate members, they will move in and as quickly as possible install their own tenants and evict existing tenants in quite a few circumstances as well, and then enjoy the rental. And the process to get rid of them after they've done this can take anything from 10 to 15 months, if you're lucky. If an organized syndicate is involved, then even worse, it will take many, many years. So the buildings that owners have abandoned in Johannesburg Central, for instance, it's just not the legal costs involved. Remember, they continue paying rates and taxes, and they're forced to pay for the utility services, the water and lights, but they're not generating any income. That income's going to the syndicate. So a wonderful business model for the syndicate and a disaster for the owner. Now, the people who've abandoned their buildings have done so mostly because the rates and taxes alone actually exceed the current value of the building. It's not worth their while to stay.
So, Dominic, you've highlighted one or two issues that has jumped out at me. You indicated that the PI Act of 1998, is it the PI Act, I stand corrected here, refers to vacant land and not actual structures, buildings and houses. You also have said that the syndicates evict current tenants and they're able to do it very quickly and then put in their own tenants. If it is so easy for the syndicates to evict current tenants and get in their own people, why do we then as homeowners or building owners have it so difficult to get rid of the tenants of the syndicates?
Julie, perhaps the PI Act, it was meant to deal with vacant land, but the definition of land includes buildings.
Okay.
So the intention was we need to look after people who've moved on to vacant land, but the drafting has unfortunately included buildings. The difficulty is, let me take you through a practical situation. Your building, apartment block, is stormed by building hijackers. They do this by force. They are very often armed and very well organized. They know the layout. You have a very, very small window of time to get rid of these occupiers or these hijackers before the PI Act comes into application. So when they're first on the property, before they've moved in tenants, they are trespassing. And then the South African Police Service is supposed to remove them. That's the South African Police Service's duties and functions. But what most people don't realize is the South African Police Service has an internal directive, essentially telling the members not to arrest someone immediately for trespass. An internal process must first be followed, and then only if the Trespassing Act is still continued will they arrest someone, and that's only if the trespass takes place in their actual presence. So if one had to follow this process, it would result in occupation taking place. We advise our clients to bypass the South African Police Service at the trespass stage, approach court urgently, get the sheriff authorized to take a private security company to remove those trespassers before occupation takes place. Now, the second stage is, let's assume occupation takes place. Now you have to, as a building owner, use the PI Act. What that entails is you first go to court to be allowed to give notice to these occupiers that you intend going to court to remove them.
Can I just interrupt you here, Dominic? You talk about, in both instances, you talk about going directly to court. Is it not very laborious? And let's assume I don't take a legal representative like yourself along. If I go on my own, am I going to get things working? Or is it best rather at that point to get legal representation so that they can speed up this whole process for you?
Unfortunately, I'm of the opinion that without, and not any legal representative, without specialists in the field, you are going to face a very lengthy and costly and time-consuming, laborious process. If you had to do it yourself, I believe you could add, you would be defaulting to the 15+ month occupation period. And if you go to a specialist legal representative, it's going to cost you money, yes. Legal representatives have to live too. So,
but at least you'll save your building or your dwelling.
Exactly. And you will save it then when they first break in. Because once PI kicks in, it is an incredible process. What many of your listeners may not be aware of is the court has been mandated under the PI Act to take various considerations into account before agreeing to give the eviction order. So they need to look at, are they elderly, are they children, are they women-headed households? How long have the people been there? Is it just and equitable? And even when the court decides, yes, we can evict someone, the court has to decide how long should we give these people to voluntarily leave before you can physically evict them using the sheriff in any event. And if the occupants have been there for 6 months or longer, the court will not authorize eviction until the municipality has found alternative accommodation for these occupiers. Quite often, the municipality simply does not have the infrastructure for that, and then it results in a never-ending occupation.
This act seems pretty skewed. Obviously, if we're talking about investment, we're talking about entrepreneurship, we're talking about getting the economy kicking. Something like this puts you way, way back, because a lot of those buildings in the CBD all around the country have shops at the bottom of the building. And they're there to service the people. They're there to bring in additional income. It's also there to create employment. But this act is putting a stop to all of that. Is it not? It's a huge stumbling block. I'm thinking foreign investment, people wanting to invest, buy a couple of blocks, buildings in Johannesburg, in South Africa, rent them out, collect the rental, and create decent living for people. It's not going to happen.
No, it's not. It's a massive risk which any investor will have to look at. It's a risk which any existing property owner has to take into account. It's unfortunate that it is the criminal elements within the country that have identified the fact that this is such a problem and poses or allows them to abuse the process. They essentially have identified that this is outdated. They can use it to their advantage, and they're doing so brazenly. The South African Police Service, in turn, has essentially said we don't have the capacity to deal with this and we don't want to deal with this. So it's an unfortunate reality that as a property owner, if you're not vigilant and you don't become aware immediately of a building hijacking or invasion, you stand to lose a lot of money and a lot of time. And it's going to cost you, as you mentioned earlier, a lot of legal fees if you have to go the PI route. It's very unfortunate, and there have been a lot of discussions, papers, there've been a lot of discussions, a lot of similar interviews in the past about saying we need to update PI to keep abreast with these syndicates specifically. Yes, it's honorable, but it's not working right now, and it is creating a nightmare for property owners.
Has the legal fraternity made inroads into the PI Act and to have it amended so these type of hijackings doesn't happen? At the same time, try and also protect homeless people and the vulnerable, because that is the responsibility of the Department of Housing. Why should you or I, who've invested hard-earned money in a building or in a dwelling, just to have it hijacked? Then another comment or question, and that is, gosh, I've heard and seen of all sorts of criminality, but this takes the cake, does it not? It is unbelievable, but it is also suggesting that it is very sophisticated. And as you've indicated earlier, it's definitely inside work, hand in hand with SAPs and other such role players.
It's, yeah, keep in mind, the legal fraternity can only comment and can only suggest. Uh, it is not responsible for the drafting and amendment of legislation. That's a government function alone. So at best, we can only hope that our pleas will not fall on deaf ears and government will take the initiative to try and update this legislation, or perhaps even create different forms of legislation. It's out of our hands. We can only comment, as I've mentioned, and there's been a lot of commentary over the years, and yeah, it's essentially what's happening is, to quote a colleague of mine, we're privatizing the government's functions.
Absolutely.
Use a building owner need to use your own money to go to court to bypass, for instance, the African Police Service, to use a private company to do their functions. If you don't have the wherewithal to do that, it puts you in a very difficult position. As the legal fraternity, the few of us are specializing in this now is we've identified this. We know what to do. If we ever forced to use SAPs, we also know how to do it and how to go about it. But it's a very intricate exercise and a very difficult exercise. In terms of the crime, look, property hijacking, it's yes, one would hope that if someone breaks into your house, they would only steal your television, but now they want your house as well. But it's not just properties. I mean, business hijackings are on the rise as well.
Whoa.
We've got very intrepid criminals who understand the vagaries and the inefficiencies of the South African system, and they're using it to their benefit. Sure. Unfortunately, the legislation just stays 500 steps behind.
And obviously they are colluding with people in the know, obviously, and that is why they can get away with these type of very sophisticated crimes. That being said, Dominic, how do I find myself in a situation like this? How will I know that I am approaching the right legal firm to represent me and to help me out of this mess?
It's difficult to give you an answer to that. You would have to do your research, and you would have to be very candid and frank with the legal practitioner. A legal practitioner may not put him or herself out to be a specialist in the field that they're not. That goes against our own regulations. So I would suggest that if you approach a legal practitioner, you would specifically say, are you experienced in evictions in a building hijacking scenario? If so, do you feel you can call yourself a specialist in the field? Are you comfortable that you will give me the relief that I require immediately in the near future? Do you have experience in similar applications? That's the most important part. And a legal practitioner is supposed to be very candid, honest, and frank with a potential client and saying, yes, I do, or no, I don't. And in turn, depending on how much, what sort of wherewithal a client has, a legal practitioner could always go and second a second, more specialist legal practitioner, for instance, a senior advocate. So there are ways and means, but it's important for a client to first identify, can this firm or lawyer do what I would need? Are they specialized? Are they happy to say they're specialized? And can they give me proof that they're experienced in this?
And finally, have you guys at your company, which is obviously you're a partner at Cowan-Harper-Madikizela, are you dealing with a lot of these cases, and are you winning? I mean, we need to hear some positivity out of you.
We are winning. We are also dealing with a lot of these cases. It's unfortunate, but yes, we do a lot of work for commercial landlords, for private property owners, and the like. And as I mentioned, it has been picking up, and we've been in court a lot recently. We've been very successful in stopping the occupation taking place. So essentially, we've stopped the hijackers at trespass stage. We've advised clients how to continue securing their property to make it less how can I put it, appetizing for the syndicates. And we've also assisted in defending syndicates' attempts to use the legal system to actually be placed back in possession. We are very au fait with the internal directives of the South African Police Service, and we know what they are going to do and what they're most definitely not going to do. And that's been a massive bonus for our clients specifically, in that we preempt the inaction, if you would, of, for instance, the African Police Service. We know how to draft the papers, what the court needs to hear. We understand where the syndicates are likely to have their informants, and we bypass that process. And that's given us a very high success rate. It's been interesting and sometimes very scary. Some of these hijacked syndicates go into a building fully armed with AK-47s.
Oh.
So it's yeah. And to perhaps put you better into the picture as well, Julie, there are private security companies or specialist units that deal with this. So even the security companies understand there's a requirement for this. So.
Okay, so if you find yourself in that situation, you do know who to get in touch with. People like Dominic Steyn, who is a partner at Cowan-Harper-Madikizela. Thank you indeed. This is truly very, very scary indeed. We do hope that, a different act or a complementary act is tabled sooner rather than later. And let's get rid of the scum that are now using more and more sophisticated methods in taking ownership of what they've not worked for. Dominic Steyn, thank you indeed for being with us on the show today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. You too. Thank you.
It's 11 after 10 o'clock, way over my wrap-up time, but that was an important interview to cover on the show this morning. Frightening, is it not? Just when you thought you heard it all, you hear about home invasions and you hear about buildings being overtaken by these hijacked syndicates. Okay, time for me to wrap up. Thank you indeed for being with me. Please stand by for the next juice, which is 26, juice number 26, by Sheikh Mahir Al-Muaykli. Time for me to wrap up. Shukran for your company. Till tomorrow morning at the same time. As always, it is Khudafiz from me, Julie Ali.